Hey guys, it's Minius. In my last video I talked a bit about what abilities might be in Mass Effect Andromeda, and that's probably worth checking out before I name the 10 abilities I want, because I'll be skipping over the abilities that I mentioned in that video. For instance, Overload is probably the ability I want the most, but it's been in every single game, and I could easily fill this list with abilities like that. You know, ones that almost certainly will be in the new game. But here are 10 slightly more obscure abilities that I want in Mass Effect Andromeda. There are a couple of abilities that fundamentally change the combat in Mass Effect, and Shadow Strike is one of them. And by change, I mean change in a good way. The number of ways you can play Mass Effect is one of its greatest aspects, and Shadow Strike allowed you to do something other than throw abilities at enemies or just shoot them. Although Shadow Strike became usable in the multiplayer DLC, it appeared first in Mass Effect 2 as one of Katsumi's abilities. Although she just sort of disappeared for a couple seconds and then poked an enemy in the shoulder for massive damage. The multiplayer Shadow Strike swung you and the camera behind your targeted enemy and delivered a devastating blow with your sword, which was insanely fun. Even if your single-player character doesn't have the option to use a sword, there is the Omniblade, and it's easy to imagine a character with Tactical Cloak being able to sweep behind an enemy and stab them in the back. I like explosions. So yeah, I love the Annihilation Field's ability to prime every nearby target for a biotic explosion, allowing you to basically run over weak enemies with a bunch of rapid-fire booms. Also, the damaging field helps protect you from weak swarmers and low-health melee enemies, as anything with just a couple of hit points can't handle being left in a damaging field. Perhaps even more than the explosions or extra protection, I like the way Annihilation Field encouraged you to play. If you can damage nearby enemies with explosions, it makes sense for you to want to run up and get in their faces, instead of picking them off from a distance. Anything that encourages you to attack or play faster is a huge boost to gameplay, and I hope this ability is available for those of the Biotic Persuasion. So, combining these abilities might be cheating a bit, but Ballistic Blades and Nightshade Blades are pretty much identical to each other, except that the latter required a grenade. And that minor difference didn't feel like enough to not mention the both of them, because what makes the abilities appealing to me is the fact that you fire sharp objects from your wrist. And while that's sort of low-tech for a sci-fi game, it is very sci-fi to fire stuff from your wrists. Basically, I like these abilities because they feel awesome to use. And they are also somewhat practical from a technical standpoint. It's a bit like having a backup shotgun without needing to equip it, and unlike some of the other abilities on this list, neither of these is overpowered. So there really isn't a good reason for not having an ability like this in Mass Effect Andromeda. Energy Drain has actually been in the series continuously since Mass Effect 2, as one of Tali's abilities, but I'm putting it on this list because it's been more of a specialty ability instead of a regular one. Energy Drain gives you a reasonable tech alternative to deal with shields and synthetics other than Overload, with a much wider damage area and the ability to put energy back into your shields, which is great because in general tech abilities are a bit weaker than their biotic counterparts. Of course, since it's been in consecutive games, I think it's got a much better shot at making it into Andromeda than many of the other abilities on this list. But Energy Drain is absolutely a cool enough ability to mention, and it is something that I definitely want. There are a couple of reasons to like the Supply Pylon. Of course, it gives you grenades and ammo whenever you plop it down, which is incredibly useful, but I actually liked it more for boosting your shields. Putting down a pylon helped a ton if you needed to defend a small area for any amount of time, or if you simply felt like posting up in a spot with good cover and making your enemies come to you. The Supply Pylon was new for the multiplayer, but it's something I'd really like to see in the single-player campaign. It's certainly an ability that would help those who rely on guns and grenades to do their damage, and it absolutely would be an awesome ability for one of your squad mates, who might actually be carrying around extra ammo anyway. Marksman was actually in the original Mass Effect, as something you got for leveling up your pistol slot. It returned in Mass Effect 3 as one of Ashley's special abilities, and then pretty much became the most useful ability for any soldier in the multiplayer. And that's why it's on this list. Marksman turns any good gun great, and any great gun into a damage monster, which is incredibly useful, and almost necessary to keep up with the damage output of biotics and techs. Marksman is a great alternative to Adrenaline Rush, and there really aren't a bunch of great gun abilities. So keeping this one around for Mass Effect Andromeda would really give you more options as to how you choose to play the game. Shield Boost is another ability that was around in the original Mass Effect, except it didn't return to the series until the multiplayer DLC when the Volus joined the fray. And while I'm sure many viewed the Volus as more of a joke character, the Shield Boost ability was legit. The multiplayer shield boost allowed you to re-energize the shields of your allies as well as yourself, and I'm a big fan of anything that allows you to stay out of cover longer, which obviously replenishing the shields of you and your allies can do. Now it's possible that this ability is much more useful in multiplayer as opposed to the single player, where you can group up and stay grouped at all times, allowing the shield boost to benefit everyone. But I think it would make sense that if someone in your party could carry tech that reboost shields, you would want them. Breve is a great ability for stripping off biotic barriers and armor, but I like it more because it gave you health back, or in the case of Mass Effect 3, gave you a durability boost, and if you spec'd it right, it was a significant boost. Breve is another one of those abilities that have been around for a while, but again, it was a specialty ability. Samara brought it into Mass Effect 2, and Kaidan brought it back in Mass Effect 3, but it never was an automatic option for your main character, which is why it's on this list. Breve is also helpful as another way to use biotics. Instead of just damaging or obstructing your target, it gives you a bonus, again allowing you to stay out of cover longer to do damage in other ways, which is always good for gameplay. The Kane Tripmine is exactly that. A gigantic explosive triggered by a laser detector. Simple enough, right? Well, they tried something similar to that before in the Proximity Mine, but that was a bit of a dud. I mean, all the Proximity Mine could really manage was stubbing the enemy's toe as they passed by. The Kane Tripmine, on the other hand, had real pop, at least the equivalent of a grenade, allowing you to take down multiple bad guys at once, which is what you want out of an explosive. This is another multiplayer ability I think would translate well to the single player. Although in the multiplayer you could place them in high traffic areas or kite enemies into them, in single player you could place them at choke points, or seal off a side of the map to concentrate fire on another. The tactical use of the Tripmine is what interests me, and I hope it makes its way into Andromeda. And finally, Snap Freeze. Now, before I go on about how much I love this ability, I want to acknowledge the fact that I know it was overpowered. Because it was. There really isn't any logical reason for a cold spray to pass through walls, and Snap Freeze is also probably the #1 way to steal someone else's kill. But even with a nerf, I think Snap Freeze can still be an incredibly useful ability. I like it so much for the same reason I like Annihilation Field, those explosions. I mentioned I like explosions, right? Snap Freeze is a great way to prime multiple enemies for a cryo explosion. And really, before Snap Freeze came along, the only way to do a reasonable amount of damage with combo explosions was with biotics. I mentioned I like multiple ways to do things, right? Shooting out a jet of super icy material is also something I can easily picture as damaging. And this fits in well logically with other tech abilities, giving you another way to take out enemies in Mass Effect. So those are 10 or so abilities I would like to see make the journey to Mass Effect Andromeda. But as I mentioned in the previous video, there are 95 abilities throughout the Mass Effect games. And even with the ones I mentioned in that previous video, there's a really good chance I ignored your favorite. So, what abilities do you want to see in the new Mass Effect? Or do you have any ideas for new abilities you would like? Let me know in the comments section below. Again, if you like this video, please give it a like. It really helps out the channel. Keep an eye on MiniusGC for more Mass Effect videos, but for now...
Have a pleasant day.